Game of Thrones, those first 4 glorious seasons, absolute peak telly, weren't they? Honestly, nothing before or since has even come close. The drama, the twists, the moments. Oh, it's even better than I remember. Just wall-to-wall brilliance that no other show can touch. And if you disagree, well, I'll try not to take it personally, but I probably won't respect you. Kidding, or am I? Sure, the ending stumbled harder than a drunken Lannister, but those first 4 seasons, pure magic. So let's stroll down memory lane and revisit the moments that had us all begging for a day off work just to binge watch. It was that good. Actually, no, it was beyond epic. Let's go. Bran's big fall. The series' first episode ends with a shocking moment that sets off a chain of events as tangled as Jaime's morals. Young Bran Stark, a sprightly lad who enjoys climbing, witnesses Jaime and Cersei Lannister in sibling bonding. Jaime, ever the pragmatist, decides the best way to keep this secret is to shove poor Bran out of a tower. Bran survives, sort of, but the incident sparks the deep animosity between the Starks and Lannisters. The Mountain decides he hates horses Gregor Clegane, lovingly known as the Mountain, a man so large and terrifying, even his shadow requires therapy. During the tournament at King's Landing, we get a glimpse of his delightful temperament. After being unhorsed by the much smaller and significantly less psychotic Loras Tyrell, Gregor decides his poor steed is to blame, so in true Mountain fashion, he lops the horse's head clean off with one mighty swing. The message, don't mess with a man who treats animals like disposable garden tools. Ned Stark versus Jaime Lannister. Honor meets ego. Ned Stark, the noble northern bloke, and Jaime Lannister, the smirking knight with too much swagger for his own good, were always destined to clash. Their rivalry reaches its boiling point when Jaime ambushes Ned in the streets, seeking a proper duel. To his credit, Jaime does insist on fairness. No sneaky stabs from behind, thank you. But as swords clash, Jaime quickly realises that Ned, despite looking like he'd rather be chopping firewood, is actually quite the swordsman. The fight is interrupted, but the tension between the Starks and Lannisters reaches new heights. Honour may not win wars, but it sure makes for good telly. The King in the North, when Ned Stark is unjustly arrested and, spoiler, executed, his eldest son Robb steps up to lead the Northern armies. Following Ned's death, the Lords of the North decide they've had enough of bending the knee to Southern rulers who can't even survive a boar hunt. Instead, they declare Robb the king in the north in a rousing scene that could make a brick wall shed a tear. Robb may not have asked for the title, but you can't really say no when burly men with swords start shouting your name. Ned plays a dangerous game with Cersei, beloved hero, devoted father, and unfortunately, a bit of a strategic numpty. After uncovering the scandalous truth about Robert's children, hint they're more Lannister than Baratheon, Ned opts to give Cersei a friendly heads up instead of, planning her swift removal. Cersei, in peak villainous form, responds with the iconic line, "When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die." Viserys, an insufferable prat with delusions of grandeur, spends much of season 1 bullying his sister, Daenerys, and boasting about his right to the Iron Throne. But when he threatens Daenerys in front of Khal Drogo, the Dothraki leader decides it's time for Viserys to receive the crown he so desires. The result? Drogo melts down some gold and pours it over Viserys' head, turning him into a human candle. The very first scene of the series reminds us that the real threat isn't scheming humans, it's icy zombies. The show opens with Night's Watch Rangers venturing beyond the wall, only to stumble upon a grisly scene of dismembered wildlings. Before they can process this chilling tableau, the White Walkers make their dramatic entrance, proving that winter isn't just coming, it's here, and it's horrifying. The Birth of Dragons Daenerys' journey in Season 1 is a masterclass in character development. From timid pawn to fiery leader, Dany's arc crescendos in the season finale when she steps into Khal Drogo's funeral pyre with her 3 dragon eggs. The next morning she emerges unscathed, cradling 3 baby dragons. The message is clear. Ned Stark loses his head. With Sean Bean headlining the show, fans naturally assumed that Ned Stark would be the protagonist for the long haul. But in a jaw-dropping twist, the penultimate episode of Season 1 sees Ned executed by the odious King Joffrey. As Arya and Sansa look on in horror, Viewers are reminded of the show's brutal mantra, anyone can die. It's a moment that redefined television and sent shockwaves through audiences worldwide. While season 2 of Game of Thrones didn't quite scale the dizzying heights of season 1, it still delivered. From doomed romances to fiery explosions, this season was a mix of drama, betrayal, and dragons. Robb Stark, lover, fighter, oathbreaker. Season 2 kicked off what would become a Game of Thrones tradition. Romances destined to end in tears, blood, and occasionally arrows. Robb Stark, ever the brooding heartthrob, was betrothed to one of Walder Frey's daughters as part of a politically expedient deal. The Freys, if you recall, are about as charming as a soggy tea biscuit, but love, as they say, is blind, and in Robb's case, deaf, dumb, and disastrous. On the battlefield, he meets the beautiful Talisa, falls head over heels, and decides that honour is overrated. Breaking his vows to the Freys may have seemed like a romantic gesture at the time, but oh, how we'd all come to regret it in season 3. Arya and Tywin's unlikely bond. Sometimes Game of Thrones shines brightest when it slows down for a proper chat. Season 2 gave us the unexpectedly gripping pairing of Arya Stark and Tywin Lannister at Harrenhal. As Tywin's cupbearer, Arya hides her identity while secretly dreaming of stabbing him in the throat. Tywin, blissfully unaware, finds Arya clever and curious, traits not often celebrated in Westeros, especially in servants. Their exchanges are tense, fascinating, and oddly heartwarming, considering one of them is a stone-cold killer and the other is, well, a child with a list. Jon and Ygritte. What's more romantic than an icy wasteland, endless bickering, and the constant threat of death? Jon Snow and Ygritte's frosty flirtation begins when Jon captures the fiery wildling during a scouting mission. Jon, bless him, can't bring himself to kill her, which leads to the two being stranded together. They bicker like an old married couple, except instead of arguments about washing up, it's more about whether Jon will freeze to death. Their banter was so electric that Kit Harington and Rose Leslie fell in love in real life, proving that romance can indeed bloom in a blizzard. The Hound, Westeros' worst employee. Sandor Clegane, better known as the Hound, truly came into his own in Season 2. Once a grumpy brute in the background, he stepped into the spotlight during the Battle of Blackwater, faced with his greatest fear, fire. On a battlefield engulfed in flames, the Hound does what any rational person would, quits. Tyrion demands he return to fight for King Joffrey, but Sandor, ever the eloquent wordsmith, replies, "Fuck the Kingsguard, fuck the city, fuck the king." And with that mic drop resignation, he sauntered off into the night, leaving us cheering. Theon's speech, an instant humiliation. Theon Greyjoy's arc in Season 2 was like watching a particularly cringe-worthy car crash in slow motion. Desperate to prove himself, Theon betrays the Starks and seizes Winterfell. His grand moment of glory comes when he rallies his men with a rousing speech about defiance and honour. Unfortunately, his men promptly knock him out and hand him over to the enemy. It's a classic case of read the room, Theon. Inspiring speeches are all well and good, but it helps if your audience actually likes you. Melisandre's Shadow Baby Season 2 introduced us to Stannis, a man as warm and cheerful as a tax audit, but his true power lay in his allegiance to Melisandre, the mysterious Red Priestess. When Stannis' brother Renly refuses to bend the knee, Melisandre decides to handle the matter creatively. After being smuggled into Renly's camp, she gives birth to a horrifying shadow monster that promptly assassinates him. It's equal parts shocking and baffling. Seriously, how does one explain that on a death certificate? Tyrion saves King's Landing. The Battle of Blackwater was Season 2's piece de resistance, showcasing the show's ability to deliver epic spectacle. With Stannis' fleet bearing down on King's Landing, it's up to Tyrion Lannister to save the day. First, he unleashes a massive explosion of wildfire that obliterates most of Stannis' ships in a fiery inferno visible from space. Then, when Joffrey flees the battlefield, classic Joffrey, Tyrion steps up to lead the defence. He delivers a rousing speech, proving once again that brains beat brawn. The White Walkers crash the party. As if dragons, shadow monsters, and wildfire weren't enough, Season 2 ends with a chilling reminder of the true threat, the White Walkers. At the fist of the first men, the Night's Watch hears the dreaded 3 blasts of the horn, signalling White Walkers. What follows is a heart-stopping sequence as Sam and his comrades are surrounded by the army of the dead. It's a spine-tingling finale that makes one thing clear. Winter is not just coming, it's kicking down the door. Season 3 of Game of Thrones took the show to new heights, or rather, new depths of despair. The fantasy elements peaked, the political scheming grew murkier, and the surprises came thick and fast. Many fans see this season up as the peak of the series, and with good reason. Climbing the Wall for Love Jon Snow blossomed into a more broodingly complex hero in Season 3, infiltrating the wildlings and falling for Ygritte, the fiery redhead who invented the catchphrase, "You know nothing, Jon Snow." Their icy romance reached new heights, literally, when Jon, Ygritte and the wildlings embarked on a harrowing climb up the wall. The sequence was equal parts thrilling and terrifying, with icy death lurking at every slip. It also helped solidify Jon's bond with the wildlings, though it was clear this love affair was as doomed as a Lannister dinner party. The Hound resurfaced in Season 3 after walking off the job at Blackwater Bay, only to find himself the unwilling guest of the Brotherhood without banners. The Brotherhood, a band of outlaws with a penchant for justice and flaming swords, put Sandor on trial for his various alleged crimes. What followed was a spectacular duel between the Hound and Beric Dondarrion, complete with a flaming sword that made regular swords look frankly boring. Just as the Hound seemed to have dealt a fatal blow, Beric was resurrected by the Lord of Light, leaving everyone, including Sandor, wondering if death was now just a polite suggestion. The Night's Watch mutiny, when the Watch becomes the Watched. The Night's Watch began Season 3, battered and demoralised after surviving an icy undead ambush beyond the wall. When they sought refuge at Craster's Keep, tensions reached boiling point. Craster, ever the gracious host, if your idea of hospitality involves insults and starvation, became the target of the Watcher's frustrations. Things escalated quickly, culminating in a mutiny where Craster and Lord Commander Mormont were brutally killed. The mutiny served as a grim reminder that even the so-called heroes of the Night's Watch could behave like proper villains under the right or wrong circumstances. Tyrion and Sansa's wedding. In King's Landing, weddings are less about love and more about strategic misery. Poor Sansa Stark thought she'd escaped Joffrey's clutches, only to be married off to Tyrion Lannister, much to the horror of both parties. The ceremony was as uncomfortable as you'd expect, featuring Joffrey at his sneering worst and Tyrion at his drunkest. The highlight, however, was Tyrion threatening to castrate Joffrey in front of the entire court, a rare moment where the audience collectively cheered for a Lannister. And yet this wedding wasn't even the season's most infamous nuptial nightmare. Theon Greyjoy went from smug traitor to pitiful victim in Season 3, enduring unspeakable torment at the hands of Ramsay. What started as mind games escalated into something far darker when Ramsay castrated Theon and sent the evidence back to his family. It was gruesome, yet somehow Theon's suffering made him a more sympathetic character, or perhaps we just felt guilty for hating him so much earlier. Jaime loses his hand. Season 3 was the start of Jaime Lannister's remarkable redemption arc, though it kicked off in the most literal and brutal way, with the loss of his sword hand. Captured by Bolton men while escorting Brienne of Tarth, Jaime's arrogance earned him a swift punishment as his hand was unceremoniously lopped off. This was a turning point for Jaime, forcing him to re-evaluate his identity as a warrior and, more importantly, as a human being. Littlefinger's "chaos is a ladder" speech. Few characters embody Game of Thrones' political skullduggery like Littlefinger and Varys, but their finest moment came when Littlefinger delivered his now iconic "chaos is a ladder" monologue. While Varys likened the chaos in Westeros to a bottomless pit, Littlefinger smugly corrected him. Chaos isn't a pit, chaos is a ladder. It was a masterclass in self-serving philosophy and foreshadowed the chaos yet to come. Jaime reveals the truth about the Mad King. After losing his hand, Jaime found himself humbled and more open to honesty. Travelling with Brienne, he revealed the true story behind his infamous act of regicide. Jaime explained that he killed King Aerys not for glory, but to save King's Landing from being burned to the ground. It was a revelatory moment, transforming Jaime from a one-dimensional villain into one of the show's most complex and compelling characters. Daenerys Targaryen had her fair share of badass moments, but none quite like acquiring the Unsullied. Trading one of her dragons for the slave army, Dany pulled a fast one on the slavers by ordering her new army to kill their former masters. With a single word, she had her dragon incinerate the remaining slavers. It was a fiery declaration that Daenerys wasn't just a girl with a dream, she was a queen with dragons and an unshakable sense of justice. The Red Wedding wasn't just a plot twist. It was the plot twist that turned Game of Thrones into a cultural phenomenon. After breaking his marriage pact with Walder Frey, Robb Stark tried to make amends by marrying his uncle to one of Frey's daughters. But Frey, the petty old goat that he was, had other plans. What followed was a blood-soaked massacre as Robb, his pregnant wife Talisa, Catelyn Stark and most of the Stark forces were brutally slaughtered. It was shocking, devastating, and proof that in Westeros, weddings are best avoided. Season 4 of Game of Thrones took everything fans loved about the show: epic battles, shocking twists, and enough betrayal to fill a small library, and turned it up to 11. This season was epic. Season 4 delivered another amazing battle episode as Mance Rayder's wildling army laid siege to Castle Black. This wasn't just a skirmish, it was a blockbuster in itself, proving television could rival the grandeur of cinema. The Moon Door. Littlefinger was always a snake, but in Season 4 he graduated to being a full-blown viper. After marrying Lisa Arryn, he wasted no time in dragging Sansa to the Eyrie and unveiling his latest masterstroke of manipulation. When Lisa, in a fit of jealous rage, began ranting about all the dastardly deeds she'd done for him, poisoning her husband, framing the Lannisters, Littlefinger responded by serenely dropping the ultimate bombshell. "I've only ever loved one woman, your sister." With that, he shoved Lisa out the Moon Door, leaving us to wonder if they were charging admission for all the drama at the Eyrie. Stannis to the rescue, just when it seemed the Night's Watch was doomed, overwhelmed by Mance Rayder's army. An unexpected saviour arrived in the form of Stannis. Charging in with a cavalry that would make any would-be king proud, Stannis swept aside the wildlings and saved the day. Stannis might not have been the most charismatic of contenders for the Iron Throne, but this moment proved he had something few others did: a grasp of the bigger picture. Also, a fabulous sense of timing. The Night King revealed, though the White Walkers had been looming ominously since the series began, Season 4 finally revealed their enigmatic leader, the Night King. In a chilling scene, pun intended, one of Craster's unlucky offspring was handed over as a sacrifice and taken to a strange gathering of White Walkers. There, the Night King himself strode forward, casually turned the infant into a White Walker, and left us all wondering just how doomed Westeros really was. The Hound orders chicken. Arya and the Hound continued their chaotic road trip in Season 4, offering viewers a mix of dark humour and unbridled violence. One standout moment came when they stopped at an inn for a bite to eat and encountered some Lannister soldiers who couldn't stop running their mouths. After a bit of banter, the Hound decided he'd had enough and demanded a chicken, then another. By the time he was done, he was threatening to eat every chicken in the place if they didn't shut up. Naturally, it all ended with a fight, some dead soldiers, and the Hound walking away triumphantly, clutching his hard-won dinner. Tyrion stands trial. After the much-deserved demise of Joffrey, Tyrion found himself the prime suspect in the murder investigation. His trial was a circus, with false testimony flying faster than ravens. When Shay, his lover-turned-traitor, took the stand and accused him of plotting to kill Joffrey, Tyrion finally snapped. In a blistering speech, he declared his hatred for everyone in the room and lamented that he hadn't actually killed the wretched boy. Then, in true Tyrion fashion, he demanded a trial by combat, the Hound versus Brienne. In a showdown no one saw coming, Brienne of Tarth faced off against the Hound in one of the most brutal fights of the series. The two warriors bludgeoned each other with swords, fists, and anything else within reach. Brienne, fueled by sheer rage and determination, eventually battered the Hound into submission, sending him tumbling off a cliff. It was raw, visceral, and oddly heartbreaking, especially since Arya quietly walked away, leaving her unlikely protector behind. The Red Viper versus the Mountain, the pièce de résistance of Season 4's battles, was Tyrion's trial by combat. Representing him was Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper, whose agility and skill seemed to give him the edge over the monstrous Gregor Clegane, the Mountain. Oberyn had the fight in the bag until his desire for vengeance got the better of him. Instead of finishing off the Mountain, he pranced around taunting him, giving the Mountain just enough time to grab him, crush his skull, and leave everyone watching utterly traumatized. Tyrion kills Tywin. Facing execution after Oberyn's defeat, Tyrion was saved by Jaime, who helped him escape from his cell. On his way out, however, Tyrion couldn't resist a quick detour to confront his father, Tywin. What followed was a scene dripping with tension. Tyrion found Shae in Tywin's bed and promptly killed her. Then, armed with a crossbow, he faced his father, who was mid-visit to the privy. Tywin's attempts at dignity were wasted as Tyrion calmly shot him, proving that even the great Tywin Lannister could die in a most undignified manner. Joffrey's death. At long last, the moment fans had been waiting for, the death of Joffrey, arguably the most despised character in television history. Fittingly, it happened at his own wedding. As he gleefully tormented Tyrion, Joffrey suddenly began choking, his face turning a shade of purple that was oddly satisfying to watch. It wasn't the clean death many had envisioned, but it was grotesque, poetic, and thoroughly well-deserved. And that's my list of great moments. What do you think? Did I miss anything major? Let me know in the comments, because this show had so many iconic moments, it's impossible to cover them all. Like, I didn't even get into Drogo's death. Ugh, what a moment. The first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones were truly some of the best TV we've ever seen. The storytelling, the characters, the twists, it was all just incredible. Sure, we all know it dropped off massively later on, but that golden era is why we still talk about it to this day. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss my next video. Until next time, peace out.